Hello and welcome to another episode of the Career Reset podcast. It feels like a really long time since I sat down here to record an episode, even though the episodes have been coming out quite regularly throughout the summer, but quite many of them have been pre-recorded, and last week I released actually the recording of my webinar, which is super good. If you haven't listened to that yet, you definitely should. It was my best webinar yet, and I've been hosting quite many, so it's really nice to see that I'm getting better at them, and I just felt like there I really could put into words all my thoughts related to job search in this day and age, and based on the feedback, it was also super helpful for the people who have watched it. But now it's kind of back to the routine for many people, back to work, back to school, and so on. And it's also back to sitting down and recording these episodes for you. And I wanted to sort of kick off this new season by giving you some ideas what you could do this time of the year to move forward in your career. Because if there is one common theme that I hear from people who are working, who are not working, there is this sense of being kind of stuck, not really progressing. It has a lot to do with the economy. Obviously, many people are getting laid off, but also the people who are not getting laid off, who are still working, they are feeling like they aren't really progressing. It's kind of hard now to really get some promotion, to really get to the next step of your career. And if you're someone who is ambitious and who has goals and who wants to move forward, it can feel really frustrating. And I feel like many people have this approach of just waiting it out. But it's been quite a long time, I think at least ever since COVID, basically, which is over 6 years, there has been this sense like now is not a good time to make some career moves, and now is not a good time, now is not a good economy, and there is only like so much time you can wait and hope things will improve on their own, because it's not like nobody's progressing in their careers. Plenty of people are getting into exciting jobs, getting promotions and so on. It's just maybe not as easy and guaranteed as it used to be when times in the world were a bit different. But I definitely encourage everyone who is ambitious, who wants to get to the next step in their career, to go after it, because I know it is still possible, but maybe the paths to achieving that are a little bit different than they used to be. It definitely takes a bit more than telling your boss you are ready to take on more responsibilities. Like that is obviously the first step you should do, but if that leads to nothing or to some very empty promises, then it's time to take matters into your own hand, and this episode will give you some ideas how you can achieve that. So if you are chasing kind of a next step in your career, if you feel like you've been in the same pretty much spot for quite a while and you're looking for some really practical ways to get to next level, whatever that might look like, then this episode is for you. And my tip number one is maybe a surprising one, but that is to actually pause and think what that next level, what that next step, what that career upgrade, whatever you want to call it, what does that actually mean to you? Because people who work with me, people who invest in themselves, in their careers, they are serious about their careers. Like they really are after not the average job that just pays your bills, but it is quite important to get very clear on what that next level career looks to you. Because what I mean by that, in especially the business and tech world, it's very hard to actually clearly be able to point out to some kind of career development, because companies can get very creative with this. They can slap fancy job titles on doing pretty much the same thing as a compensation for maybe not being able to really promote you or not being able to pay you a higher salary. The least painful for the companies is to promise you some better sounding title, which can seem like that is good thing, that on paper your background will look more attractive and maybe it will help you to get your next job if you have this fancy job title. But Because this has been such a common practice, the recruiters especially, they started pretty much ignoring the job titles and they go to actually see what you did on a day-to-day basis, what were the actual responsibilities, achievements of your job, and so on. So if you think that someone has manager in their job title, nowadays it really just means absolutely nothing. There is even junior manager as a title, so it can almost be an entry-level job. It can mean managing people, managing projects of different sizes, managing teams of different sizes. So that word in and of itself, it doesn't mean that if you're in any way more desirable to the job market than someone who doesn't have managerial title. That was true maybe 15, 20 years ago, but nowadays, because of the creativity many companies have taken with the job titles, generally the value of simply that has gone down, and it's much more about what you actually did in that particular job. So I think that in the past, when people went after some career progression, what that often meant is chasing directly or indirectly higher job titles, like that you start in some job entry level, maybe you have a junior in your title, then maybe you get a senior in your title, then maybe you get a manager, and it used to in some ways pretty much represent some kind of progression. But as I mentioned, that is no longer the case. So it is nowadays much harder to actually be able to see what is a progression, what is a step forward. And that needs to come from you and from your understanding of what that looks like to you. That is a very common debate I have with my clients. They tell me they want like next level and higher salary and a promotion, but they are often at the point where just getting a senior in their job title, that's not the next step they are looking for. They are looking for some very tangible increase in the responsibilities, in the influence, in the decision making, and that can look very differently to some people. That can be going that leadership path, going after having your own team, and that is very separate than going into leading a certain function, leading more responsible projects, leading products, product development. These jobs do not necessarily need to incorporate the team leadership in them. And actually, more and more, I am in discussions with people who tell me they want to go the next level in their career, but they don't necessarily want to be leaders. They don't want to have responsibility for people because, for example, here in Finland, it's a lot of babysitting. You are responsible a lot for not just the deliverables of the people, but also their feelings and their happiness and so on. And that puts a lot of pressure, and you need a lot of emotional capacity to handle all these different personalities and things associated with that. And that doesn't always maybe reflect in the salary and having more responsibilities and influence in the company. So I know many people have become very skeptical about any sort of long-term career planning. But even though there is much more volatility in the world and things are changing fast, the traditional company structures are pretty much still the same. You still have the CEO at the top, you still have all these different C something people below, you still have people leading teams. So if that level of responsibility is attractive to you, that can still be your goal. Then it of course depends what are the paths to actually get to that. But I feel like with so many career topics, we always go from one extreme to the other. So people used to be very extreme career planners and have a very clear goal in their mind, that what is the end destination, and then just like all this uncertainty and things happening in the world maybe made it complicated or made it not possible. So then people went to the opposite extreme of let's not have any goals, let's not have any plans, let's just go with the flow and hope for the best. And that is also not a good approach, because talking about career in business and tech, it does not happen that you would like magically get these promotions and get into these high level positions and high level salaries that goes with it. Like, it is still possible, but a very important first step is actually admitting it to yourself that that is what you want, and then researching and understanding what getting to these roles looks like, whether it is in your own company where you currently work or in a different company, what size of company would make sense, what industry would make sense. And then when you start planning these actual steps, it's not like that everything will fall into place and be easy. You will still need to adjust a lot along the journey, but at least you are moving forward towards something. And I'm making an assumption here that people who listen to this podcast, who listen to career podcasts in general, they just aren't the people who don't really care what kind of job they have and whether their career moves forward or not. But because it feels like it's becoming so much harder to have some kind of steady, successful career, it's like that people try to talk themselves into thinking that they don't really care about jobs and they don't really care about careers, and that as long as they have a steady job, that's all they need. But that is not often the truth, especially when we're talking about salary. That is something people even like need to have some increase in salary. And if you once get to this path of like business or tech jobs where you start with university, they are not the easiest universities to get through. Then you maybe start with some very low paid, unpaid internships. You feel like you've served your time and you deserve some rewards for it later in your career. That is definitely true. But I feel like maybe readmitting to yourself and saying it out loud to people around you that you really are after more than just the average career is really important, because then that allows you to actually take the next steps and start thinking like in practical terms, what would be the steps that you take. But if you are trying to talk yourself into that being successful in your career is not that important, but that's not how you truly feel, that just leads to a lot of misery. And I think it's the same in business, because I run my own business and I try to surround myself with people who are doing the same, just to be exposed to like-minded people. But sometimes, because it is not easy time to have a business, definitely not. It requires way more effort maybe than it used to, because there are more entrepreneurs and marketing is getting more complicated and all that. Maybe people can fool themselves a little bit into thinking that I don't need to be a millionaire. All I need is to earn decent money to support myself and my family. But that is not, like, you don't become an entrepreneur for that. And if you do, the amount of effort you need to put in as an entrepreneur to make at least some kind of decent salary in the long term, it doesn't really make it worth it. But so many entrepreneurs are so resistant to admit, actually, I'm interested in the big things, in the big clients, in the big money, because we don't want to seem greedy. And also we have this protective mechanism that what if it doesn't work out? Let's not even say it out loud. Let's not even admit it to myself, because I don't want to disappoint myself. Like, always going to the worst case scenario, that what if it doesn't work out? And I would so like if we started going more into the best case or just positive scenario, that what if it does work out? So many people spend so much time thinking about what if it goes badly, what if it doesn't work out, what if I get laid off, what if I can't find a job. So much of our brain space is occupied by these thoughts, and entrepreneurs are the same. What if it doesn't work out? What if I can't make the money to support myself? And like, as humans, we just have the ability to figure things out if they happen. Especially with careers, with jobs, you can't really give up on it. Like, you can give up on a diet, on a new habit, but you kinda need a job to survive long term in the world. So people have this crazy ability, when it's needed, they will figure it out. It's like with parenting, especially at the early stages when you can't sleep and you have to fully dedicate yourself to this little human who can't take care of any of its basic human needs. It's really tough, but you have to get through it. No matter how little you slept, no matter how tired you are, there is another person depending on you, and you just have to figure it out how you survive it. I don't want to go to the extreme cases, but 99 point, I don't know what percent of people, like, they just push through and figure out because they just have to. And it's the same with careers. If you feel stuck, if you feel like your career hasn't been progressing, before you start taking some panic action, or before you decide that you are not meant for a great career, that is such a nonsense. Everybody who wants a great career is meant for it. But you need to think like, okay, if now I'm stuck, now I'm not progressing, what would actual progress feel like? Not some artificial promotion that my company would generate for me just so that I stop complaining about my salary. But maybe not even the immediate next step, but what is the direction I want to take? Where do I want to be? People hate this like in 5 years, but where do I want to be eventually? What would make all my effort, all that I've put into my career so far, what would make it worth it? Like, at which point would I really think that, yes, this is the right direction, this is where I wanted to get to, this is where I feel like I can create a lot of value. And instead of censoring yourself and instead of thinking that would be so hard and that would be so unlikely, allow yourself to live in the best case scenario, into what's possible. Look at people around you, look at the people you look up to. They surely aren't some special superhumans or people who got extremely lucky. I think if you really think deeply about it, you will find a lot of similarities between you and the people who are in the careers you want to get into. And actually allowing yourself to even explore what that would be like without immediately shutting it down, that no, that's not realistic, what if it doesn't work out? Just allow your brain to live for a little bit in the positive. What if it does work out? What if this is actually possible for me? What if really all it takes is just to decide that I'm gonna go after it and then see how it goes and readjust? With my own experience, I, on paper, when I started my business, I didn't have anything. I was not a very likely person to succeed in entrepreneurship. And the only thing that helped me succeed, to get me to a place where I can earn comfortable living, to support myself, do something that I really, really enjoy and work way less than I did in my full-time job, is that I persisted and I just kept trying and I kept going. And that is not a unique skill to me, and often people associate entrepreneurship with putting some extreme amounts of efforts. That is not the case. I was pregnant and had a small child, and now I'm pregnant again, by the way. So most of my entrepreneurial journey had these, I don't want to say obstacles, but aspects that defined my capacity and how much effort I can put into it. I keep very strict weekends, evenings. I sleep when I can because of my child. So that's not what it's not about like putting some extreme hours into success. It's more like keep trying even if it feels like it really is not working, because the only way to make it work is to do the work. But instead of thinking like, but like I'm so young and I don't have any history of success and I don't have a big network, and if I really put my mind into it, I could convince myself out of pursuing entrepreneurship. Like anyone can talk themselves out of pursuing all these different directions I have outlined in their career. But you can just as well, instead of thinking about all the reasons why it wouldn't work out, think about all the ways how it could work out. Because sometimes my clients present their goals in a way like, I want to learn how to read people's mind. That is impossible as of now. Let's see where the technology takes us. But yeah, that is impossible. But any kind of career direction, promotion, next step, whatever, there is no like physical obstacles. It is possible. And then it's just about exploring the ways to get there and being willing to take some wrong turns and learn from them, and being able to keep trying even though the first time you don't succeed. Like that is all that is. It's not in the end that complicated, like that it would be very, very difficult intellectually to understand what you need to do. What it is difficult is emotionally to experience the setbacks, but that is something you can learn to process. That is something I help my clients process. So step one, decide what you actually want, or more like, I think most people know it. The problem is that they are censoring themselves and talking themselves out of it and thinking that they don't have what it takes, and all this kind of nonsense. And if you need help with that, whether it is to actually decide the direction or getting some kind of pep talk that you can do it, then you can book an intro session with me and we can see if working together would be the right step. I always put a link to a very short intro form where you can tell me a little bit more about your current situation, and I invite you to a free intro call where we talk through our current situation. I talk through how specifically I would be able to help you in my career coaching, and then we can decide if it makes sense to work together. But if you feel very stuck in your career and if you are wanting to take the next step, but you feel like you can't even see what that would look like and how that would work, then I would really recommend to get in touch with me and we can get it sorted in 1 hour and be clear on that path for you. So great, I've been talking for half an hour and I've only talked about the first point, but luckily the second two are much shorter. So the first tip was a bit more about thinking and not so much about the practicalities. The second tip will be very practical, and that is to update your LinkedIn profile, because reviewing LinkedIn profiles is a big part of a career coach's life and day to day. And I am the author of many high quality LinkedIn profiles. So then I very much live in my own bubble. And then whenever someone sends me a message, whenever I see an interesting post by someone on LinkedIn, I always go to their profile. It actually matters. I think many people don't even realize the value the LinkedIn profile has. If you want to do any kind of networking, any kind of personal branding, if you want to be contacted by recruiters on LinkedIn, if you want to be taken seriously, your LinkedIn profile is like the most important thing for that. And yet I am quite shocked when I see profiles that have even things that I consider the most basics missing. So if there is no about section, if there is no description of your work experience, there is just the job title and maybe like 1 or 2 sentences. If it's not up to date, if it's in any way confusing, if it doesn't make sense, then it's a massive, massive wasted opportunity, and it can be fixed relatively easily. You can get in touch with me. I'm happy to review your profile, or you can take a look at it yourself and make sure you're actually using that space. I really want to highlight that it does matter, that if you want to connect with people, send messages to people, which you should, if you are after the bigger career goals that I have mentioned, it will require some kind of effort. And the LinkedIn profile is just such an important tool. And obviously, we all want the best case scenario to just be contacted directly with opportunities in our inbox. But here I often see this cycle like, no, it's not possible for me because my background is not that attractive, so I'm not even gonna update my profile so I don't get contacted because the profile is just not good. So one project you should absolutely take a look at this year is to update your LinkedIn profile and to think how to make it attractive to employers. Now, especially for my job seekers out there, let's just once and for all make it clear that being very heavy on highlighting the fact that you are a job seeker is just not attractive to employers. Jobs are not given based on a need basis. They are given based on who brings the most value. So it is okay to have a green banner to say you're open to work, looking for new opportunities. But if everything I see in your profile is open to new opportunities, currently looking for jobs, open to work, career break, like first experience is career break, currently open to new opportunities, nobody cares in the end. People care what can you actually offer. And if you have a lot of valuable information in the profile, they will contact you with opportunities whether you are open to work or not. Because even people who are currently employed can change jobs if a good opportunity arises. So that plays so much bigger role than trying to make sure everybody knows that you are open to new opportunities, let alone everybody who is on LinkedIn and has a profile there is inherently open to new opportunities. Some people will have explicitly not interested in changing jobs, but 95% of people want to be contacted with opportunities whether they are employed or not. And if they have a strong profile that is attractive, that is interesting, that has a lot of value, that is clear to potential employers, they will be contacted with opportunities. And then with all the other activities like sending messages to people on LinkedIn, if you are sending the message from profile that contains very little information, that doesn't make it clear who you are, what you do, why you are contacting the person, your chances of getting a reply back will simply be much lower. So it is a very, very important tool. And it's also related to my final point, which I will share now. And that is related, like specifically, I would say to this time of the year. And if you are really thinking of how you could take your career to the next level, in the rest of this year, then I would highly, highly recommend that you sign up for some event that is relevant in your industry. This time of the year in Europe especially is a very busy and heavy on events. The two main times is like spring, March, April, May, and then September, October, November, and then as we move closer to the Christmas season, it goes down a little bit. But for example, here in Finland, there are major business tech conferences happening now, September, October, and those are such a good opportunities to kickstart your going forward, like stepping out of the crowd, doing something that not everybody does, exposing yourself to trends, to meeting a lot of people, meeting a lot of influential people. It is one of the best things you can do for your career. So that's why I'm sharing it now at this time, that I would really recommend, if you've maybe never been to a conference related to your field, that you really consider signing up for one. And it can be a smaller event, it can be a meetup with people in your industry, or it can be one day, one afternoon conference, or it can be a multiple day event. I am very much aware that some of these events cost a lot of money, but I've decided to be a bit more direct in this sense, that obviously you need to consider your finances and what you can and cannot afford. That's why I'm also giving here as an option meetups that can be free and can sometimes have free food, which is always nice. Or if you are very new to going to events, that may be less intimidating. But even if it's a bigger event and even if it requires an investment on your part, it is good to be aware that good successful careers require investments in time, sometimes in money, in learning about trends and all that kind of stuff. They just, as I have said multiple times throughout this episode, successful careers in terms of salary, scope of influence, anything you want to associate it with it, they just, like everything, they require investment. Businesses require investments to grow, so do careers. So you cannot look at it from the lens of that it's just money down the drain, that it's an expense, and to think that but with this money I could have a nice weekend holiday. But a weekend holiday is not an investment. It's just something you enjoy, something you should do if you if you want to, obviously, but with the expectation that that is just money you spend and you get nothing long term in return. But investing in your career in the form of, for example, going to some events or conferences, that is an investment. If you approach it that way, if you approach it as an investor and you actually go there and you actually engage, talk to people, and you get something out of it, then you will get that money back many times over in your next salary. That will be higher than the people who don't invest in their careers. That is a very simple, real equation. Any kind of investment in your career, it can look like courses, reading books, going to events, working with a career coach. Those are investments that will pay back. They give you something extra on top of what an average person has, and the people who have something extra are the ones who get into the exciting jobs. So that's like a side half a tip here, that if you are after exciting and successful career, it is good to start accepting that those careers inherently require investments. It was a very big lesson for me this year in my business, because I had this mindset that I will invest in my business once it's successful. That is a very illogical way to think about it, because if you don't invest, you will never succeed. So like waiting for that success without investing is a lot of time wasted. And this year, when I have invested the most in my business, is when I have made the most money also. And it's not like a zero-sum game that I put money in and I make the same amount of money. It exponentially grows, it multiplies, and you benefit from these investments for years and years and years to come. So it is definitely worth it. And also, like, just basic human psychology, there is a lot of advice you can consume online. There is a lot of things you can do for free, but we just don't show up the same way for the free things. Using again my example, there is so much free business advice. I wouldn't inherently need to pay to access the advice, but I know that if I invest in something, I will approach it completely differently. I will not skip. I will make sure I get the most out of it, because I don't want to be a fool who paid money and then don't consumed and implemented the advice. And it's the same way like with a conference. When I go to conferences, I can immediately spot the people who are there and their company paid for it, which by the way can be another way. You can ask your company if they would pay for your ticket, for example. But then the people who pay their own money from their own pocket, like they are the people who are really active, who are really there, who are taking notes, who are meeting people, and they get way, way, way more value from that event. So investing money is also a really good way to force yourself to actually show up for the things you pay for and to take it seriously. So often when there are free events, hundreds of people will sign up and 20 people will show up. But if you have paid conferences, obviously there will be people who life got in the way or something happened and they can't make it. But the people who only feel lazy, they will still show up because nobody wants to pay this amount of money and then sit at home and feel like a fool for not going. So even if this feels like a too big of a step, like going to some event, going to some conference, or you really cannot afford it, just getting into the mindset of investing in yourself, investing in your career, whether it is buying a book that is related to your field and actually committing to reading it, is a really good way to start on the path of teaching yourself that the exciting, successful career paths are possible for you if you take the steps, and accepting that it will require something of you and investments in terms of time, energy, being brave, being willing to fail. And sometimes the investments are also monetary, and those are usually very, very good ways to move forward. But I really recommend researching events in your specific industry. Really try to go with something that is actually relevant, where you have a good chance of meeting relevant people, going to talks that are in some ways inspiring. And usually some kind of bigger events, bigger conferences, they can be catalyst for a lot of different things. So there are obviously excellent networking opportunities if you actually, approach people and talk to them. Sometimes the events themselves have some way of encouraging or facilitating networking. They can be excellent source of LinkedIn content, so boosting your personal brand and boosting your profile also, because your activity shows as a part of your profile. And if a recruiter sees that you're someone who actually goes to conferences related to your field, they will think like, wow, this is a person that is really serious and we would love to invite them for an interview. So as you can see, everything I have mentioned in this episode kind of works together very nicely. So step one, taking some time to reflect on why exactly you feel stuck in your career and where would you like to see yourself, what would be that ideal next step or the ultimate step. Updating your LinkedIn profile is one of the most important tools you will have in your career in 2026. And investing in yourself, in your career, and showing up to some event in your field. It's so, I really cannot highlight enough the value showing up and meeting like-minded people, how much it can really kickstart your career, because you feel so inspired, you feel so motivated. It like gets you so much in touch with what's happening in the field. It really is such a great catalyst for excitement. If you are lacking excitement in your career at the moment, then being surrounded by inspiring people, inspiring talks is such a good way to reignite that. And then it's just important to build on top of that momentum with the different ideas I have suggested. But I hope you now have a really good plan for how to get the most out of this season and how to make sure you are moving forward in your career this year still. Let me know what kind of inspiration you took from this episode, what you're planning to implement. And this is also a really good time of the year to get in touch with me. I tend to have really good results with clients who start this time of the year. So we can get together, we can talk where you're at, where you would like to be at, and we can make a really strong plan on how we can make that happen. I have quite many intro sessions scheduled for this week. I have just one starting in 25 minutes. So really excited for that, excited for meeting new professionals and helping them succeed in their career. And you can be the next if you fill out the form in the show notes in the description of this episode, and I will send you a link to meet with me. So I hope you're having a great back to work season, that you're doing well, and that you feel inspired after this episode to go after the exciting career you absolutely deserve. And I will talk to you in the next episode. Bye bye.